now seems like a good time to talk about the difference between panic and anxiety because anxiety is the emotion that helps you get stuff done. It's planning for the future, right? And a lot of times, if we have been haven't been taught how to work with our anxiety and the magic of making to-do lists, or or procrastination, however you like to work with it, if we've been shamed out of that, or maybe we've been, I don't know if this is the word, apathized out of it,
I like that.
then we have to rely on our panic. And so anxiety is something that I see around me all the time, getting things done. I feel like, Sarah, that's what you're just talking about. And you too, Heather, of, that's what people rely on to get the things done that absolutely need to get done. When really it's your anxiety. And if you are able to listen to your anxiety at at a sooner time, earlier, when it's more soft instead of so intense that it turns into panic. Like, oh my God, if I don't do this, I'm going to get fired and then I will die. Sort of a panic situation. Then anxiety is something that helps you, it just moves you through the day and it helps you feel accomplished, right? It pairs with your contentment. You're like, yeah, I checked that stuff off. I'm awesome.
Yeah, it's funny. Anxiety and I have a very new dialogue because I used to, and this is the only emotion that I'll talk about in terms of like an army, but I used to deploy my anxiety and try to control what was going to happen rather than have it very well organized my life. And so that for me is the line when I start to notice, oh, hey, I've sent her out too far to go and do a task that she can't do, is going to fail hard trying. And it's only going to impose and take away somebody else's choice. Those are my three big things. When I notice that I'm trying to control a reaction, typically it used to be what it was of like crafting an email of like, okay, I really want them to respond well. So how can I do that? As though it was something that I could do. Well, the only emotion that could come in and like wrangle anxiety was panic, because something had to cut off that previous action, I suppose. And so whenever I talk with clients and they typically come in and say, I'm really anxious, those are my distinguishers of, is it anxiety or is it something else? Because anxiety is like the ultimate personal assistant of I can get my stuff done. I can make my decisions, and she works so well when she's inside my bubble. But when I send her out, woo, things get messy. And it's such an interesting thing when people bring up panic attacks or anxiety attacks. It's always that wondering, well, what was happening right before that? Of what was trying to get done. And then oftentimes people will notice, oh, I didn't know that's what I was trying to do. I just thought I was trying to like have good groceries in my house for dinner. I didn't realize I was trying to control the whole parking lot and the getting into the store, because now it's so different with masks and lineups and whatnot. And no wonder going to the grocery store is now an anxiety and potentially panic filled situation. Yeah. So that anxiety panic differentiation for me was really helpful.
Yeah, I love that. I usually think of, so people can interchange fear, anxiety, and panic and use them all to mean the same thing. And how I generally, in my head, but I hold this lightly, make the distinctions is I think of panic is about, has roots in the past. Fear is about present moment, orienting to novelty and change in the present moment. And anxiety is about seeing in the present moment what needs to happen so I can get to the future I want to have. And they can definitely all be present, but they're doing different jobs. And so for me, the key to understanding which one to go with is to listen for time, actually. listen for. And again, panic is tricky because panic has two faces. Panic has the roots back in time and the clear and present danger. So like Heather's example of going to the grocery store during COVID, there is an element of potential clear and present danger in the mix. So it's not a past thing, right? So it does get tricky, but I generally I try to suss out who's who with the time cues. And I've noticed that when anxiety isn't getting done, panic is very much going to be evoked. Likely, we haven't mentioned this emotion yet, but this will be a whole like another hour that we could talk about this one, is shame in the mix. Because if I'm not going to get done what I set out for myself to get done, it's not just a threat like security threat, it's I'm a bad person. And shame and panic, Shmanic, if you will, that is a potent combination. In part, I think because in my reading of Lisa Feldman Barrett's books on neurobiology recently, she really hones in, like one of the questions she poses is, how did we get evolved to a point where our brains do not fully wire up until our early to mid 20s? Like, how could that possibly have evolved for us? And her speculation is that we have kind of outsourced a number of our duties or obligations or functions to culture. So some species are born like they never see their parents. They hatch out of an egg and they trot off with their DNA telling them who they are and what their function is in the world. But with humans, we have the flexibility to be born in different environments, different cultures, different families, and adapt to wherever we're born into with the flexibility of this brain that doesn't fully wire up until early to mid 20s. So we're offloading our teaching to culture. And our survival depends on that culture that we grow up in those first 20 years. And so shame is a big emotion that gets us prunes and tunes our synapses to tell us what's right. And our survival depends on that. So panic and shame have a very, very intense relationship with one another. And back to anxiety, when we if in our childhood, we needed to get things done to be a good girl, then there's going to be shame and panic there when we are faced with the possibility of not reaching our task.
Yeah. Wow, that was awesome. Oh my goodness, what a great note to end this conversation on. I'm definitely going to think a lot more about the culture aspect of things. Like, so interesting. And Lisa Feldman Barrett is a really fascinating researcher who's written a book called How Emotions Are Made, and then her newest book is called
7.5 Lessons About the Brain. Yeah. That's the one that's my speed. The other one's really thick.